privilege and pleasure to introduce Katharina and Michael Uhde. Katharina Uhde is Assistant Professor in Violin and Musicology at Valparaiso University. She holds Master's and Doctor of Music Performance degrees in Violin Performance from the University of Michigan and a PhD in Historical Musicology from Duke University. Dr. Uhde is a scholar known internationally for her work on the music of Joseph Joachim, which is the title of her first monograph published by Boydell and Brewer last semester. And it's the first book to treat the compositions of Joachim comprehensively. Her current research projects include a cultural history of musical ciphers, co-authored with Larry Todd, and various projects related to artistic research. Her generosity in sharing her research is evident in the 30 to 50 concerts and lecture recitals which she gives every year. Recent performances included her solo performance with orchestra of Joachim's Hungarian and Irish fantasies, heard for the first time since 1850 in November 2018 in Ann Arbor, which she will perform again on the 12th of July 2019 in Baden-Baden in Germany. To turn to Michael Uhde, who was born to musical parents. His father, Jürgen Uhde, was a pianist, musicologist, and author of several standard works about piano literature. He and his wife, Sanya, a very gifted and internationally renowned cellist, have also passed that on to their children. Tatjana and Katharina were both musicians. Michael studied at the music universities of Freiburg with Karl Seemann and at Milan with Bruno Canina, holding a musical scholarship of the Studienstiftung des Deutschen Volkes. He is regularly invited to give concerts and courses in piano and chamber music in many academies and universities across the world. It's a very full and impressive biography in your conference booklet on page 13. He is Professor of Piano and Chamber Music and Vice Rector at the University of Music Karlsruhe. And we feel very honoured that you are here with us today to share your knowledge with our graduate students. Today's keynote is the result of many years' immersion in Joseph Joachim's music and engagement with the composer's reception. As the leading scholar on Joachim and close reader of manuscript sources, Katharina works with a double sensitivity. She always gets inside her subject to comprehend the composer and affect the listener, but she also stands outside to see the composer in context and to test his violin, piano, and orchestral works with an extremely musical ear and to cultivate a sense of scholarship. Joachim is well served by this abundance and by the scholarship of Katharina Uhde, whose numerous articles have appeared with publishers such as Boydell and Brewer, Breathless Publishers, Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, and in journals such as 19th Century Music Review and the Musical Times. Katharina has also written the work list for the Joachim entry on Oxford Music Online, the Joseph Joachim article for Oxford Bibliographies, and she has edited for Bernreiter 2 newly discovered virtuoso fantasies by Joachim, which also appeared in autumn 2018. The title of today's keynote address is Joseph Joachim's Ireland, which Katharina and Michael will illustrate with excerpts from Joseph Joachim's fantasy on Irish melodies for violin and piano, his variations on an Irish Elfenlied for piano, and his fantasy on Irish themes. Katharina and Michael, wir freuen uns, Ihnen beiden herzlich begrüßen zu dürfen. We're delighted you are travelled over to share your work with us, and we're very much looking forward to your address and performance. And I know all my colleagues and graduates join me in extending to you a very warm welcome.
Here, and I would also like to thank the members of the Society of Musicology in Ireland and the International Council for Traditional Music in Ireland, also to Dr. Helen Lawler and Christine, and of course Lorraine. Thank you for making it possible for me to share my research here with you today. We might view the storied 19th century European fascination with Ireland as an enthusiastic embrace of an exotic other. Though, as Helen Thompson has averred in Irish Women Writers Speak Out, quote, Irish identity is more than the sum of birth and residency. Irishness is a state of mind, an emotional relationship to place, people, and culture, unquote. In the case of music, how composers came to view Ireland and how this view stood in relation to Ireland's own perspective on her music has been eloquently elucidated in many works of the recent years. For example, Harry White, The Keeper's Recital, Music and Cultural History in Ireland, or in the volume edited by Harry White titled Musical Constructions of Nationalism. And then also the recent Music and the Irish Literary Imagination. The International Council for Traditional Music in Ireland continues to dedicate itself to Irish music, so that a lot of research, including at this conference from young students, is becoming available. Most recently, topics surrounding Irish music, musicology in Ireland, and artistic research in Ireland have been discussed in contributions by Denise Neary, Alex Klein, Maria McHale, Carol Mulaney-Dignam, and Michael Murphy to the massive festschrift for Harry White titled Music Preferred, edited by Lorraine Byrne-Bodley and published in 2018. Harry White's research suggests that the history of musical nationalism in Ireland cannot be compared with other European examples for several reasons, including because Ireland's music, as already Thomas More suggested in his letter to Marchioness of Donegal, published in 1823, so Ireland music is very tightly connected with politics. White confirms, quote, in Ireland it is music which tends to stimulate political thought rather than the other way around, unquote. Thomas More's Irish melodies seem central for some continental composers' musical imagination of Irishness. More's Irish melodies, which began to find their way to London and eventually abroad, were published in 1808 to 1834, the majority equipped with introductions and accompaniments by Sir John Stevenson. The Irish melodies came about as a consequence of the Dublin publishers James and William Power's request to write lyrics to a series of Irish tunes in the manner of Haydn's settings of British folk songs. Thus, hundreds of marketable arrangements of popular Irish melodies became available. In the course of the 19th century, More's Irish melodies, as well as the story poems La La Rook, inspired composers from Berlioz to Félicien David, and from Schumann to Anton Rubinstein, as well as Charles Villiers Danforth later in the century. Continental composers were drawn to More's melodies for their, quote, simple and exotic subjects and the opportunities for colorful music, unquote. Joseph Joachim, who has not yet figured in this company, can now be added to the list, as we shall see, and hear shortly. My talk today is titled Joachim's Ireland. It includes, first, a so-called Irish fantasy for violin and orchestra, which was premiered in 1852 as Fantasy on Scottish airs, but later titled by an anonymous hand as Fantasy on Irish themes. Second, a fantasy for violin and piano on Irish tunes, drawn from Thomas More's Irish melodies. And third, variations for piano and Irish elfin song, which, however, in the interest of time, I think I will have to skip. The two Irish violin fantasies on the program allow us to better understand some of the key issues of musical nationalism in general, such as national labels which don't entirely match the contents, or attraction to the other on the basis of one's own otherness. Also, the absence of discourses, and the problem of using music without referencing the source. I hope that in the end we will have a better perspective on what drew Joachim to Ireland, which he visited many times. I'm sorry. there it is. My methods are historical, analytical, and cultural, given the process of bringing works from dusty boxes to the stage, which required a lot of research, but also violin practice, and in the case of the Goldschmidt and Joachim fantasy, days of work to create a legible Sibelius by putting a handwritten manuscript, impossible to read in many cases, into the Sibelius software. So my methods are therefore also those of an artistic researcher. I'm an arranger, assembler, and performer. Beginning with Joachim's Irish fantasy of 1852. In 1943, during the Second World War, several boxes of particularly valuable, irretrievable books and scores from the library of the former Königlich Akademische Hochschule in Berlin were evacuated to Lodz in Poland due to bomb threats. These boxes gathered dust in Lodz until they were discovered in 1989 by a Bach scholar, Christoph Wolff. Wolff was particularly interested in the estate of Philipp Spitta, whose materials were in some of these boxes. But what was also in one of the boxes, and what was and is of much greater interest to me, were two so far unknown works by Joseph Joachim. The so-called Irish fantasy, which we will play today in the end, and a Hungarian fantasy, both for violin and orchestra, gathered in a beautiful bound manuscript, which can be seen here. And if any of you would like to change your seats for better visibility, you're very welcome to do so. So these pieces have not been acknowledged in the literature, except in my recently published book. And when I learned about them, I was in the process of writing this book. So immediately when I found a trace to these works, I got on the next plane to study the manuscript in Lodz. I was informed that I was the first person to see it. The archivist served me tea and cookies to celebrate the occasion. This was in 2016. Until last November, both fantasies were unpublished. As of October 2018, there's the Bergenreiter edition available that has both of them in it, with a piano arrangement. Today we will play the version with piano. The original is for orchestra. Until my discovery, these pieces had not been performed since 1853. Dr. Lorraine Byrne-Bodley already hinted at the performance with orchestra that I'm very privileged and lucky to have had it past November and also in July 2019 in Baden-Baden. In my following contextualization of Joachim's Irish, Scottish fantasy, I would like to show that no single national label matches entirely the contents and soul of this work, which on a second glance crystallizes as a multi-European product. Joachim's fantasy allows us to uncover an unknown side of him. Born in Hungary to Jewish parents and growing up in a German-speaking Jewish community, Joachim moved to Vienna in 1839, beginning his studies shortly thereafter under Joseph Böhm, the teacher of virtuosos such as Heinrich Wilhelm Ernst. Joachim relocated to Leipzig in 1843. There he encountered Mendelssohn and took his first lessons in composition with Moritz Hauptmann, which resulted in early works such as Lieder and violin virtuoso pieces, including the 1852 Irish fantasy. Unlike the large programmatic overtures on Shakespearean dramas, which Joachim began conceiving in Weimar, where he was concertmaster under Franz Liszt from 1850 and onward, the early fantasies show Joachim's compositional profile of the Leipzig years, that is, the profile of a real virtuoso. The Joachim that most histories write about, namely the German violinist, professor, and Hochschuldirektor, who was intimately associated with the exclusive German canon, is far from the young composer Joachim I am talking about. The Joachim of 1852 to 1859 is an artist in his youth and early adulthood, torn between playing the violin and composing. He stopped composing in 1863, thus his compositions never truly entered a discourse. Joachim's identity in 1852 was still noticeably Hungarian, and his religion was not yet Protestant, but Jewish. He was attracted by exotic melodies, especially dark and minor mode ones, which somehow, in my opinion, match his brooding temper that we read about in the letters. His generic preferences as a composer included more popular than aesthetically elevated genres. And Joachim turned to the musical other in many guises, including Irish, Scottish, Hungarian, partly in order to come to terms with his own otherness. Joachim's Irish fantasy was composed 1847 to 52, for his own use, of course. Though correctly announced at its premiere in the summer of 1852 as Fantasy on Scotch Airs, it was then mislabeled in an autograph by a foreign hand as Irish fantasy. However, I've spoken with many Irish and Scottish people and heard that Thomas Moore was right when he said that the Irish and Scottish topoi in music overlap. Be that as it may, there's one clue in the manuscript which might have motivated the Irish title. As it turns out, the Irish fantasy shares a bifolio with a cadenza fragment for Beethoven's Violin Concerto, dated Dublin on May 25th. The end of the Irish fantasy appears on the first recto and the cadenza on the first verso of the final bifolio. The Dublin date offers us the useful terminus antiquem, because Joachim was only in Dublin on the 25th of May in 1852. So the fantasy must have been written before this cadenza fragment. After its premiere on May 31st, 1852, the Irish fantasy was performed a couple more times. In that summer, on June 3rd and June 11th, then put away for the remainder of Joachim's life. Turning our attention to the music, we find some Scottish tunes that we shall introduce, but there are also Mendelssohnian glimpses divulging the deep impact that Mendelssohn's music had on Joachim. And then there's one more tune reflecting the young Joachim's turmoil in 1847, caused by Mendelssohn's death. The Irish fantasy begins with John Anderson by Joe John, a tune from Robert Burns' Scots Musical Museum, which, as I was told, resembles an Irish tune that I cannot pronounce, but it's something like Greaskin Lawn. Yes. an archaic sound. Joachim made, of course, a few changes to the tunes, both to this one and to the next one, which is the Bluebell of Scotland, but that is understandable. He also varied them in a virtuoso manner in order to fill a whole fantasy. We shall now skip over these changes because we have a lot still to do. We shall only remark that the D Dorian mode and its toying between D minor and F major remained in Joachim's memory. In 1856, he chose an Irish elfin song, Elfin Lied, as the theme for a set of piano variations composed during the counterpoint exchange with Brahms. The second song in the fantasy is the Bluebell of Scotland, which Joachim decorates with turning figures, thus transforming it into an uplifting alternative to the more melancholy John Anderson. With the third melody of the Irish fantasy, a wistful 6/8 meter tune, we get to the heart of the identity of the Irish fantasy, in my view. Although the tune is neither Scottish nor Irish, but Italianate. After searching for a long time for the identity of this tune, I finally found the answer in a letter at the British Library. I'm going to play the tune in question of the Irish fantasy, and then I will tell you the background. Library. In that letter, Joachim's uncle, Bernhard Victor, urged his nephew to write not only compositions that were like medicine, quote unquote, but also sweet music, quote unquote, such as variations on popular airs. And the uncle suggested a specific opera, Lucrezia Borgia by Donizetti. Looking through all the arias in that opera, I found one aria that resembles what I just played. It's called Nella Fatale di Rimini. That found its way into the fantasy, and that is Mendelssohn's influence, who passed away in 1847. Joachim writes in a letter after Mendelssohn's passing that Mendelssohn's music was his only consolation, having lost his mentor. And so it is perhaps no coincidence that there seems to be an allusion to Elijah, the oratorio by Mendelssohn, composed into the measure where the solo violin enters. So can we have measure 11? There are a couple more Mendelssohnian resemblances. One is a harmonic progression resembling the Variation Sérieuse, and the other a violin technical up-bow staccato slur formation that feels and looks very similar as the third movement of the Mendelssohn Concerto, which Joachim began studying in 1845. But in the interest of time, we will skip over these two Mendelssohnian features. And we move on to the Joachim Goldschmidt fantasy. The Joachim Goldschmidt fantasy is something of an unusual composition. Composed by Joachim and Otto Goldschmidt, with some passages left unfinished, it compares perhaps to Mendelssohn's collaboration with Joseph Merck in 1830, the Variations Concertantes, with a missing cello part, supplied recently by Auler Todd and published with Beerreiter. Otto Goldschmidt, a German Jew, was born in Hamburg in 1829. He and Joachim studied together in Leipzig, which laid the foundation for their lifelong friendship. From 1858, Goldschmidt lived in London, where he became a professor. in 1863, and later the vocal director at the Royal Academy of Music. We can, with quite a lot of confidence, date the origins of the Joachim Goldschmidt fantasy to 1859, as references to Ireland and a journey to Ireland begin to appear in correspondence between Joachim, Clara Schumann, and Joachim's parents. Joachim writes to Clara on August 26, 1859, "Regarding my journey to Ireland, it shall commence at the end of September," unquote. On September 10, Joachim writes again to Clara, quote, "The Ireland tour demands that I practice the violin. Also, I would like to arrange a few Irish melodies for piano and violin with Goldschmidt," unquote. But there's also an inscription on the title page, which is here on the PowerPoint, which tells some of the circumstances, but significantly neglects to make Goldschmidt's name explicit. It says, "Fantasy on Irish melodies, written down swiftly for a journey with Jenny Lind to Ireland, partly in the head of her husband, with whom I composed this piece." Who that husband was, we don't get to hear on this page. Furthermore, as was customary, of course, the titles of the airs and melodies were also not identified. They left some detective work for me, although you all would have immediately heard and identified these tunes. The form of the Goldschmidt-Joachim fantasy unfolds as follows. There's a grave, andante espressivo, tempo giusto, with variations, and at the end an allegretto. The three tunes used are Come Over the Sea, The Minstrel Boy, and Love's Young Dream. The fantasy begins with an introduction to Come Over the Sea, which is then fully presented in the ensuing andante espressivo movement. A small quasi-improvisatory transition in the violin leads to the next tune, The Minstrel Boy, which becomes the theme for what should have been 4 variations. Of these variations, only 3 are notated fully. The 4th shows only the violin part, which varies the tune in the minor mode, while the piano part is missing entirely. An allegretto as final section offers the 3rd tune, Love's Young Dream. The fantasy begins in D minor and ends in D major, just like the 1852 Irish fantasy. As we would expect, the composers work with all 3 melodies, adjusting in the first the rhythm, in the second the key, and in all 3 tunes there are little changes made to melody, rhythm, and texture. The opening shows open spaced chords and gaps in the register, both stylistic markers associated with folk music, in particular Irish as well as Scottish musical topics. The dark haunting tune moves from a D minor in the beginning to A minor in second inversion and B flat minor, then making a pensive turn to A major and then getting cut off, and instead we go via the augmented triad to a diminished 7th, the entrance of the violin. Let's hear this first opening. That precedes the full statement of the theme shows 2 Joachimian idiosyncrasies that I've encountered in many of his works, which point to the fact that Joachim was the composer of this section rather than Goldschmidt. This section is also in Joachim's hand. First, Joachim seems to have an amiable gift of creating violinistic passage work that sounds as if made up on the spot. Second, obsessive repetition of a small motive appears in measure 18, which registers as an accumulation of energy, a build-up or a moment of congestion before finally the energy finds an outlet to something new. But the composers also made sure to allude to Ireland by imitating the Celtic harp. The score says quasi-harpa in one place. And in the piano, we see arpeggiated chords, while the violin is instructed to play pizzicato chords, as you will hear in the following section, which we will now play. the Minstrel Boy. This section is notated in Goldschmidt's hand. Again, changes are made to the tune, including transposition to D major, revoiced chords, added rests, revised fermatas, and other changes. Overall, however, and this is true for all three songs, they remain very recognizable in comparison to Stevenson's version. We shall now play the tune, The Minstrel Boy, as it appears in the fantasy. Appears in the finale, an allegretto in D major. Notated again in Joachim's hand, the composers transposed the song of Stevenson's arrangement to D major. Among the nicest features of Joachim and Goldschmidt's rendition is the melodic violin accompaniment of the tune in the opening, as well as the handing over of the tune from the piano to the violin for the returning A section of the tune, and offbeats on the 3rd and 6/8 note of the 6/8 measure that relieve some of the duple emphasis of Stevenson's arrangement. Performed this fantasy on their concert tour with Jenny Lind in October 1859. As a letter from Joachim to his parents shows, they had quite an itinerary. Joachim writes on October 15th, quote, "Since the end of last month, I've traveled from town to town, always fiddling, changing the strings, wearing white ties, and all those things that are part of concertizing, so that you must not be angry at me for not writing. We have played 12 concerts since 26th of September, and in 1 hour we play our 13th here in Belfast. Our trip began in Dublin, then came Cork, Killarney, Limerick, Weberfont, Killarney in the south, and Belfast in the north. Some reviews of these concerts survive, but so far I've not yet found reviews about this specific fantasy. In conclusion, we can briefly summarize the meaning of Joachim's Ireland. In 1852, Joachim was torn between being a virtuoso and a composer, and he was disoriented, torn between Hungary and a musical sphere in Leipzig and Weimar that was worlds apart from his home. He was evidently attracted to national tunes, Scottish, Irish, and Hungarian, because they provided a starting point for his own fantasy and inspiration, a basis from which he could improvise and unfold his impeccable virtuoso performance skills. As Joachim wrote in 1868, he loved the Green Island, as he called Ireland, and the warm, good-natured people in Ireland, as well as the mentality, which he favorably compared with the, quote, somber, oppressive atmosphere and joyless activity, unquote, in London. Musically, the Irish tunes afforded a playing ground for his imagination of an archaic, exotic, other sound world, where beautiful melodies, some melancholy, some heroic, others dance-like, and many in the minor mode, came together, to which he was attracted musically, but also on the basis of his own complex, artistic, and multinational, multicultural self. As there was absolutely no literature on either of the two works, and in one case not even a legible score, I hope that my work of bringing these pieces back to life will serve other young violinists so that this charming and violinistically challenging repertoire will get played again after more than 150 years. We shall now perform the Irish Fantasy of 1852.